Hello everyone, I am Matt Williamson. How's it going? Going great here. Just finished been doing a lot more homework on this game. Upon further review, I got my day after thoughts as opposed to the immediate reactions from last night. First off, I had an Elliott mix-up that a couple of you guys caught me on. I was calling out Dejan Elliott for being the guy that got beat by a tight end I'd never heard of and being out there late in the game. I forgot there was another Elliott in the defensive backfield. That was Jalen. So, my error. These things happen. It was almost 2 in the morning. So, oh well. All right. As usual, we have snap count stuff, which I think is important. There were 59 offensive snaps in this game. Zach Frazier led the way pretty easily with 44. Fields was after that at 38. Then we start dropping off. Spencer Anderson, 33. Quez Watkins, 31. Didn't make a lot of impact for 31 plays. Broderick Jones at 30. McCormick and McCullum at 29. Fitzpatrick, more on him later, 27. Dylan Cook, 23. Scott Miller, 22. Russell Wilson only played 21, as did Darnell Washington and Dan Moore Jr. So when Wilson went out, Moore went out. Van Jefferson played 20. Pruitt played 19. Pickens only 18. P. Ryan and Hayward, 17 apiece. Anderson, Hardy, Devery Hamilton, and James Daniels, along with Joey Fisher and Tyler Beach, 15 each. Calvin Austin, 14. Freiermuth, 13. Watts, 13. Siamalu and Shampkin, 11. Edwards and Harris, 10. Warren only lasted 9. Sokol, 7. Rodney Williams, only 4. Coletto, only 4. That's not a great sign, I don't think. Jeray Jenkins, 4. Cordarrelle Patterson, 3. And if you hadn't heard of TJ Luther, he was out there for one play that probably should have been a touchdown if he kept running. It was not a perfect pass by Fields, though, either. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads when the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head over to our online casino and get in on a game or blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our 150 different slot games. Head to the website today and use promo code BLEAV, B-L-E-A-V, all caps, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. All right, now we're going to do defensive snap count, some observations, special team snap count, etc., etc. 56 total defensive snaps. Kyron Johnson is intriguing to me. He led the way with 41 as an edge defender, a little undersized, but I've been bringing him up to you guys a lot lately. Julius Welshoff also played 41. Then there's a drop-off. Trice comes in at 39. Thomas Graham, 28. Peyton Wilson, 27, but he left the game. 25 for both Jacoby Windman and the aforementioned Jalen Elliott. Mark Robinson with 23. Ryan Watts with 22. Adams played 22. Loudermilk played 21. KZ, 20. Lowry, 19. Rush and LaQuay Washington, 16 apiece. And then 15 for Gilbert, Queen, Ogunjobi, Sutton, Lee, Benton, and Porter. Elliott and Slade come in at 14 each. Herbig, 13. Leal, 13. McMichael, 12. Prevalon, 12. Fitzpatrick, Minka, 11. Dante Jackson, only 10. And then all these other guys are under 10. But Jeremiah Moon was one that stood out at only 5. Matakevich only played 2. Roberts only played 3. So, take what you want about that, but I think there's some telling things in there with how snap counts aren't given out. You know, they're thought out, and sometimes injuries derail that throughout the course of a game, of course, but that's well thought out usage. Some guys that were better than I thought. Ogunjobi and Benton were really good early in this game together in a four-man front as your D tackles. Very encouraging against a good offensive line. Not a great one, good offensive line. Leal continued to impress me. Herbig kind of is what he is at this point. I mean, he makes plays in limited snaps. We just talked about his snap count like every game. Mark Robinson. I almost didn't put him in there, but special teams, he keeps showing up more. He is definitely a splash player. Some questionable run defense, though. Like when they were getting run on, I thought he was part of the culprit there. Does he have a chance to make this team? I feel a little better about it now than I did when camp started. We'll see. I thought this was a good game by Rush. We talked about Thomas Graham a lot yesterday as the nickel. I thought he played pretty darn well. It was a very small sample size, but I have been meaning to say this about Najee Harris. I think he's running harder with more quickness and explosion after losing a little bit of weight than maybe at any time in his career, so that's promising. Dez Fitzpatrick had a good game, and not just on teams. So, it could have come down to like Dez Fitzpatrick or Mark Robinson as your last roster spot. Maybe. Who's better on teams? And then I like to give credit to some other guys too, and these are two former first-round picks that are really good players. I think they're borderline stars for the Bills, and they might be taking that step forward. And if we were Buffalo fans right now, we would be talking about Ed Oliver and especially Rousseau. Those two were really, really impressive, living up to all the hype, all the pedigree. So you got to call these guys out when they play really well. Guys that were worse than I thought, speaking of which with the Bills, Trubisky was pretty bad this game. And I think his story is written at this point. And, we lived through that last year. I'd be worried if he was Josh Allen's backup if I was the GM of that team. But although, if Allen were to miss time, their season's probably shot anyway. And another one was Loudermilk. I don't know that he makes his team. I think that could be the end of the road for him. He plays too high. He doesn't make a lot of impact plays. Guys like Lowry are better. Leal's better. I think I could be done with Loudermilk in a Steeler uniform, to be honest with you. So, once again, Pat Fryer's usage was a little bizarre. He played a little over 50% of the snaps, but they weren't using as many 2 and 3 tight end sets as they would. And last week, if you remember, when they had 2 tight end sets, he wasn't in the game with those 2 tight end sets, So I stand corrected. He did not play that many snaps. He played 13 snaps. So scratch that on Freiermuth. There's people worried about his usage. I just think it's been a little bizarre. So I think they're saving him, is what it comes down to with Freiermuth. I'm not worried about him at all. I just think that he's being used sparingly, and I think they'll unleash him on the Falcons when the time is right. That's just my thoughts on it. So, anyway. As for Broderick Jones, I think that right elbow is a problem. And I'm not using it to blame, but I remember when he injured it in 7 shots, and I was watching it live, and I know he came right back in. But I watched that injury happen and thought, oh, we might be losing him for some time. And he was in a lot of pain. But he is taking over the Pouncey mantle as the toughest guy, the leader in that offensive line room. I don't think he's going to allow anybody to, get him off the field. He's going to play through pain. It's his outside arm, which is problematic for a right tackle. It's his right arm. And you hope, as we mentioned, this isn't a third offensive line injury, and I'm not saying that's the only reason he played poorly. He played poorly because he got beat by a good player. And I think his pass protection needs technique work, and we'll get to some other things here too. But I do think that elbow is a factor, is all I'm saying. Johnston, who I raved about last night, it was just under a 57-yard average punt. 57 yards is booming it. I just wanted to reaffirm what that guy is doing is so impressive. All right, this goes back to Jones. Again, if this was a Bills podcast, I would not be raving about their O-line either. I thought it was a rough O-line day for everybody involved. And I frankly think that, and I talk about this all the time, I think the biggest discrepancy that the NFL doesn't want you to know about is the defensive linemen in the NFL are way deeper, way more talented, and way better than the offensive linemen. And I think it's a big reason scoring's down. And where I'm going with this is, after having the most intense practice 2 days before this game, I thought that advantage got exacerbated. That you could just keep bringing in defensive linemen. There weren't enough offensive linemen to go around. I think they were more fatigued than the D linemen. They're not as athletic, and I thought that gap got wider in this game. It doesn't excuse bad O-line play on either team, but I wouldn't look too much into it. Along those lines, this Steeler offense, I really wonder how many snaps in practice, or certainly in games, has your best 11 been on the field for? Or even your best 13, bringing in a third receiver, a second tight end, a third tight end, whatever, fullback even. Not a lot, and it's a new system. So maybe we are a little crazy to think, why wouldn't they be kind of struggling with some communication and crispness and learning together? Wilson didn't play hardly at all at camp, and they've shuffled offensive linemen around. There just haven't been a lot of snaps with the entire offense together. Now, here's a conversation I had with my buddy Mike Pursuta, who I will say is a little resistant to analytics and thinking outside the box at times. Great analyst, great dude, great guy to have a beer with. But we had a good conversation in the post-game show about how it looks like on paper, and we talked about this yesterday, you and I, that the Steelers won the turnover battle 1-0 with the Killebrew interception. But in reality, they lost it by 3 because they failed on 3 fourth down attempts and a missed field goal. That's -3. If you're -3 in pretty much any NFL football game, preseason or not, you're going to lose. You know what I mean? So it was a pretty equal game other than that. Is kind of where I'm going. And it was not a well-played game. I'm not saying it was. 2 other Bills I wanted to highlight is, boy, do I like their running back crew right now. I mean, Cook and Davis couldn't be any more different. Cook's the receiver, dynamic, explosive dude. And Davis is that bowling ball of butcher knives. He's just really hard to tackle. And the Steelers found that out the hard way when he started coming to the game and just running through them. So look out for that Bills backfield. I think they're in really good shape there. An odd thing I wanted to bring up. So this new kickoff rule, and I'm going to bring this up to my buddy Peacock on the Peacock and Williamson podcast I urge you to check out. So I forget what the infraction was, but the Bills were kicking off, and they had a penalty, and it was a 5-yard penalty. So the Steelers didn't have a good return, so they said re-kick it with the penalty, involved with that. So what they did was they took the tee, moved it back 5 yards, and as is pretty much always the case, the kicker still was able to put the ball in the 20-yard landing zone, so it didn't hurt them at all. And it makes me wonder, why not push the rules on the kickoff team if all you're going to do to me is make the kicker move back 5 yards with these goofy rules and still kick it to the 5 or 10 or whatever? I don't know. I think that's a little odd. Speaking of kickoffs, we're going to end here on special teams. The Steelers only kicked off twice, as you might have figured out. So we didn't get a whole lot in terms of usage and things on Steeler kickoffs because you only score once as a field goal and you kick off at the beginning of one of the halves. It's about the lowest amount of times you can kick off, give or take. Well, there's only one more, but you get that. So special team snaps, though. Kovacevic led the way with 15. Hayward and Killebrew at 13. Herbig at 12. We'll get into the others in a minute, but those are your 4 core special teamers. Kovacevic, Hayward, Killebrew, Herbig. I'm hoping this next guy, Watts, who I think is promising, who with 11, can also join that group, and I think he's banging on the door to do that. We talked about Robinson versus Fitzpatrick. They both played 10 special team snaps. Peyton Wilson played 9, but he also was injured, so maybe he gets to that Herbig level as well. And Rodney Williams played 8. Didn't play much offense, but he played 8. And that's his, path to the team, of course. So that's what I got. Don't look too much into this, but there's a lot to take away, of course. But I do urge you, remember 365 days ago, or maybe 355 days ago, when Kenny Pickett and the Steeler offense was just tearing through every defense every time they got the ball in the preseason. Wasn't really indicative of what happened during the season. All right, everyone, take care.